The one who loves you a lot ignores you a lot. Think about someone who loves you, really loves you. Now think about the times they ignored you. The unanswered messages, the missed calls, the moments you felt invisible. It doesn't make sense, does it? If they love you, shouldn't they want to be around you? Shouldn't they be reaching out, checking in, making sure you're okay? We equate attention with love, but here's the truth. Love is not always loud. Love doesn't always announce itself. The people who love us the most are often the ones who pull away the hardest. Why? Because love is complicated. Because people are complicated. Sometimes they ignore you because they trust you. They believe in your ability to stand on your own. They know they don't need to hold your hand every second for you to know they care. Other times they ignore you because they're struggling, because they're lost in their own storm and don't know how to ask for help. And sometimes they ignore you because they love you too much to risk saying the wrong thing. Silence isn't always a lack of love. Sometimes it's love in disguise. But here's where it gets tricky. How do you tell the difference? How do you know if their silence is love or if it's something else? Look at the pattern, not just the moment. Do they disappear when things get tough, only to return when it's easy? Or are they always there when it really counts? Because real love, the kind that matters, might ignore you today. But when you need them the most, they'll be the first to show up. Love is not measured by how often someone talks to you. It's measured by how deeply they care when it truly matters. So before you assume someone doesn't love you because they're distant, ask yourself this. Do they leave when it's hard, or do they stand by you when it truly counts? Because that's where real love is found, not in the noise, but in the quiet presence that never fades. Love and ignorance are not opposites. We've been conditioned to believe that love should always be loud, always visible, always present. We expect those who love us to constantly check in, to always be there, to never let silence linger between us. But what if I told you that love and ignorance are not always opposites? Sometimes the people who love us the most are the very ones who seem to ignore us the most. And that contradiction can feel confusing, even painful. It's easy to assume that when someone ignores you, it means they don't care, that their silence is a reflection of their disinterest, that their absence is a sign of emotional neglect. But love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Think about the people who have been constants in your life, the ones who truly care about you. Have there been moments when they pulled away, when they seemed distant, detached, even uninterested? It's tempting to take that personally, to see it as a rejection, but often it's not about you at all. People express love in different ways, and for some, that love exists in the background rather than the foreground. Some people love so deeply that they assume you already know it. They don't feel the need to constantly remind you because to them, love is a foundation, not a performance. Others withdraw not because they don't care, but because they are battling something internally. Something they don't know how to articulate. When someone is overwhelmed by life, by emotions, by their own fears, they may retreat. Not because they don't love you, but because they are trying to protect you from the storm inside them. And then there's another kind of love. The kind that trusts you enough to step back. The kind that doesn't hover, doesn't cling, doesn't feel the need to prove itself every moment. This kind of love believes in your strength, in your ability to stand on your own. It doesn't rush in to solve every problem or fill every silence because it understands that love is not about control but about respect. It's in these moments of distance that love is often misunderstood. Because we associate love with presence, we assume that absence means indifference. But sometimes stepping back is an act of love in itself. A person may pull away not because they don't care, but because they believe in your ability to navigate your own path. They may stay silent not because they have nothing to say, but because they are carrying emotions they don't yet know how to share. They may ignore you not because you don't matter, but because they are afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of showing vulnerability, afraid of burdening you with their own struggles. Love doesn't always come wrapped in constant attention, in daily messages, in grand gestures. Sometimes love exists in the quiet spaces, in the trust that allows someone to step back without fear of losing you, in the unspoken understanding that real love does not demand constant validation. Silence speaks volumes. Silence is unsettling. It leaves room for doubt, for assumptions, for questions that have no immediate answers. When someone we care about ignores us, our first instinct is to fill in the blanks ourselves, to assume the worst, to wonder what we did wrong, to question whether we even mattered to them in the first place. The absence of words can feel louder than any argument, more painful than any rejection. But what if silence isn't just an absence? What if it's a presence of something unspoken? We often mistake silence for indifference, but more often than not, it is a reflection of something deeper, something that words cannot easily capture. When someone chooses silence, it may not be because they don't care, but because they care too much. They may be wrestling with thoughts they don't know how to put into words, emotions that feel too heavy to share. They may be afraid that speaking will make them vulnerable, that opening up will expose parts of themselves they're not ready to face. Silence can be a defense mechanism, a way to create space when emotions become overwhelming. It can be a shield against pain, a way to retreat into one's own thoughts when the outside world feels too demanding. People who overthink, who analyze every word, every possible reaction, often choose silence not because they have nothing to say, but because they are unsure of how it will be received. They fear saying the wrong thing, making a mistake, or revealing a side of themselves they've spent years trying to hide. There are also moments when silence is a test, though not in a manipulative way. Sometimes people pull away to see if they will be noticed, to gauge whether their absence is felt. They wonder if the other person will reach out, if their presence truly matters. It's not always a conscious decision, but rather a reflection of their own insecurities. The quiet hope that someone will break through the silence and remind them they are seen. And then there is silence born from pain. When someone has been hurt deeply, their first response may not be to fight back, to explain, or to seek closure. Instead, they shut down. They go quiet, not because they don't want to be heard, but because they don't know how to make sense of what they're feeling. The weight of past experiences, of disappointments, of unresolved wounds can make words feel useless, as if speaking would only deepen the ache rather than ease it. But silence is never empty. It is filled with meaning, with emotions unspoken, with battles unseen. It is a language of its own, one that requires patience and understanding to interpret. It holds truths that words sometimes fail to express. The comfort of presence. We have been taught to measure love by words and actions, by how often someone reaches out, by how many times they remind us that they care. We look for reassurance in texts, in gestures, in grand expressions of devotion. And yet, some of the deepest, most enduring forms of love exist in the quiet spaces in the background of our lives, steady and unshaken. There are people who don't always say, "I love you," but they show it in the way they remember the little details, in the way they quietly check on you without making it obvious. They don't overwhelm you with affection, yet they are always there when you need them. Their love is not performative. It does not demand attention or recognition. It simply is. Like gravity, their presence is felt even when unseen. It holds you together, keeps you steady, anchors you in ways you might not even notice. You don't always think about gravity, but without it, everything would come undone. This is how certain people love. Not with constant reminders, not with loud declarations, but with an unspoken, unwavering presence that never fades. Some love by simply showing up. They are the ones who answer your call at midnight, who listen without judgment, who make sure you eat when you forget. They may not always have the right words, but they stay, and sometimes staying is the greatest act of love. This kind of love does not need to announce itself because it is secure. It does not demand validation because it knows its own depth. It exists in the way they stand beside you in your quietest moments, in the way they let you be yourself without expectation or condition. It is a love that does not seek to possess but to support. It does not push itself forward, yet it never disappears. And because it is so constant, so reliable, it is easy to overlook. We take it for granted, assuming it will always be there because it always has been. But just because something is silent does not mean it is insignificant. Just because it does not demand attention does not mean it lacks intensity. The deepest love is often the one that does not need to prove itself because it knows that true connection is not built on how often you say you care, but on how deeply you show it without needing to be seen. Love tests boundaries. Love is often thought of as something that should be given freely, without hesitation, without distance, without restraint. We assume that if someone loves us, they should want to be close, to express their feelings openly, to be present in every way possible. But love is complex, and the way it manifests is not always the way we expect. Some people love by holding on tightly, by making sure you never feel alone. Others love by giving you space, by trusting that distance does not mean disconnection, by believing that love does not have to smother in order to be real. People express love in different ways, shaped by their experiences, their personalities, and their fears. Some offer love through words, through constant affirmations, through conversations that reassure, through verbal reminders that you matter. These are the people who believe love should be spoken, that it should never be left unsaid, that silence creates uncertainty. Their love is in the way they tell you they miss you, in the way they check in even when nothing seems wrong, in the way they use language to remind you that you are never forgotten. Others express love through actions, believing that what they do carries far more weight than what they say. They may not always tell you how much they care, but you'll see it in the way they support you, in the way they remember the things that matter to you, in the way they show up when you least expect it but need it the most. Their love is practical, steady, woven into the fabric of everyday life. They don't say, "I'm here for you," because they assume you already know. They've been proving it all along. And then there are those who love through absence, not because they don't care, but because they believe that love should allow room to breathe. They don't want to overwhelm, to control, to impose. They believe that love should be a safe place, not a restrictive one. That sometimes the greatest act of love is to let someone go so they can grow, so they can find themselves, so they can navigate their own path without feeling tethered. These are the people who step back when they sense you need space, who give you room to figure things out, who trust that real connection does not require constant closeness to remain strong. Love tests boundaries in ways we don't always recognize at first. Sometimes we want love to look a certain way, to fit neatly into our expectations, to follow the script we've been given. But love is fluid, evolving, shaped by the people who give it and the ones who receive it. It is not just in the words spoken or in the things done, it is also in the spaces in between, in the silences that allow reflection, in the trust that does not need constant validation, in the understanding that closeness is not the only measure of connection. The weight of emotional baggage. We often take silence personally. When someone ignores us, when they withdraw without explanation, when they seem distant in ways we don't understand, our minds race to find meaning in their actions. Did we do something wrong? Did we say something to push them away? Is their silence a reflection of how they feel about us? But the truth is, ignoring someone isn't always about them. More often than not, it is about the person who pulls away. The weight they carry, the wounds they have not healed, the emotional baggage that shapes the way they respond to love and connection. Everyone carries something from their past, whether they acknowledge it or not. Pain does not simply disappear. It lingers. It embeds itself in the way we interact with others, in the way we trust, in the way we let people in. Some carry childhood wounds, experiences that taught them love is conditional, that affection can be taken away without warning, that vulnerability leads to pain. Others carry the scars of betrayal, of relationships that ended without closure, of moments when they gave their heart only to have it broken. These experiences don't just fade, they shape the way a person navigates love and intimacy, often in ways they don't even realize. For some, love feels dangerous, no matter how deeply they want it. The closer they get to someone, the more their past fears resurface. The fear of abandonment, of being hurt, of opening up only to be rejected. And when those fears become overwhelming, their instinct is to retreat. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to reconcile the love they feel with the fear that lingers inside them. They pull away not to hurt you, but to protect themselves. They ignore you not because you don't matter, but because their own emotions are too heavy to carry alongside yours. There are people who have spent years building walls, believing that distance is the only way to stay safe. They have learned to equate love with pain, to expect disappointment, to assume that the moment they get too close, something will go wrong. And so when they feel the depth of their own emotions, they panic, they run, they shut down, not because they want to, but because they don't know any other way to cope. And then there are those who don't even realize they are pulling away. They are so consumed by their own inner battles, by anxiety, by depression, by unresolved emotions, that they don't have the capacity to be fully present, even when they want to be. Love requires energy, attention, emotional availability, and sometimes people simply don't have enough left to give. They care, but they are exhausted. They love, but they are drained. They want to show up, but they don't know how to push past the weight of what they're carrying. We often assume that when someone pulls away, it is a reflection of how they feel about us. But sometimes their withdrawal has nothing to do with us at all. It is about them, their pain, their past, their struggles. It is about wounds that have not healed, emotions they don't yet know how to process, fears they are still learning to face. Recognizing real love, we often grow up believing that love is something we can measure by how often someone calls, by how quickly they respond, by how much attention they give us on a daily basis. When someone showers us with affection, we take it as proof of their feelings. When they pull away, we start to question everything. But real love is not about constant validation. It is not about how many times someone says, "I love you," or how often they remind you that they care. The true measure of love is found in something far deeper, in how a person shows up when it truly matters. Anyone can be present when things are easy, when life is smooth, when emotions are high, when everything feels light and effortless. Love in those moments is simple. It doesn't require effort. It doesn't demand sacrifice. It doesn't test patience. But love is not tested in moments of ease. It is tested in moments of difficulty, in the times when staying is a choice rather than an instinct, when showing up takes effort rather than convenience. Real love reveals itself in the quietest, most unglamorous moments. It is in the way someone listens when you're struggling to find the right words, in the way they stand by you when your world feels like it's falling apart. It is in the way they make space for you even when they don't understand what you're going through, in the way they don't run when things get hard, in the way they choose patience when frustration would be easier. It is easy to confuse attention with love because attention is visible, immediate, and comforting. It reassures us in the moment, making us feel valued and wanted. But attention can be fleeting, given freely when it's convenient, withdrawn when circumstances change. Real love, however, is steady. It does not waver based on moods or distractions. It does not disappear when excitement fades. It is not measured by grand gestures or by how present someone is every single day, but by their willingness to be there when it counts the most. Some people will shower you with affection when they have nothing else pulling at their time. But the moment life becomes overwhelming, they disappear. Others may not always be expressive, may not always say the right words or give constant reassurance. But when you need them the most, they will be there. That is the difference between surface-level affection and real, enduring love. And real love is not just about showing up in crises. It is about showing up in the in-between moments, the days that are neither good nor bad, the times when you don't explicitly ask for support but still receive it. It is in the consistency and the reliability and the quiet acts of care that are not meant to impress but simply to provide comfort. It is easy to focus on how someone treats us when they are present, but sometimes the true depth of love is revealed in how they respond when distance grows, when misunderstandings arise, when life pulls them in different directions. Real love does not always look like constant attention, but it always makes itself known when it matters the most. Love is not always loud, obvious, or easy to understand. Sometimes it exists in silence, in distance, in quiet acts of presence. The one who loves you a lot may ignore you at times, not out of neglect, but because of their own emotional battles, a trust in your independence, or their belief that love gives space to grow. True love is not measured by constant attention, but by who shows up when it truly matters. It is steady, unwavering, and often unseen. Real love doesn't demand to be noticed. It simply remains, even in the quiet.